All right, everyone. For 17 weeks now, we've been talking SEC football here on the SEC in 60 for 17 consecutive weeks. And we're talking spring football. We're talking positional battles in camp. We're talking about the top coaches, the top players, running down top 5 lists for the last several weeks, X factors for this season. This week, Stephen M. Smith and myself, we talk about actual game matchups. This is exciting. It's week 17 of the SEC in 60. We bring in Stephen M. Smith of TouchdownAlabama.net, and I know, for as excited as I am, Stephen M., I can only imagine how amped you are.
Mark, NFL is great. Preseason is good. You know, it's great to watch these NFL teams in these spots. But college football, this is where it's at. Season, and I am amped up for actual matchups.
If you love sports, there's a certain reason you love different sports. I'm a huge Major League Baseball fan for certain reasons. You mentioned the NFL. The NFL is as good as it gets on the field. The athleticism and the playmaking ability is unmatched. But when it comes to the entire scene, when it comes to the passion, the prestige, the pageantry of college football, it is unmatched. And I love it, and that's why I've chosen to do nothing but college football on my channel. So this is the SEC in 60, everyone. If you've stumbled across this for the first time, this is what we do every Monday, 1 o'clock Eastern, noon Central. It's the SEC in 60 right here on Google Hangouts. And if you can't catch us live each and every week, we've got a podcast that's available every Tuesday morning, at least by Tuesday morning. That's when I promise to deliver it, but it's usually there for you a lot sooner than that on iTunes, on Podbean, whatever your service is. You can catch the SEC in 60 podcast. Also, it's uploaded to YouTube just a couple hours after we're finished here. So let's run down the matchup, Stephen. I think we've got a load of them, and it's going to be difficult to cram it into 60 minutes. We've got so much to talk about. Let's talk about what I consider to be the most important matchup, because it should be a hotly contested game in Columbia, South Carolina. It's a conference matchup, so that kind of wakes up some people when you got to dive into conference play from week 1. So if your sights are set on winning a championship, you got to get it going from week 1. And here it's Texas A&M at number 21 preseason and 9th-ranked South Carolina. I'll give you my quick thoughts on this game. I think it's a situation where we're hearing some reports out of South Carolina camp that Mike Davis is questionable, ran for 1,100 yards, is a Heisman Trophy candidate for South Carolina, and Steve Spurrier is saying he's questionable for this game. And he's had all sorts of injuries, most notably in the spring. He was held out of most spring drills because of rib issues. He's had some other ailments, and therefore we're looking at Brandon Wiles, who's the most experienced backup. He's racked up 3 100-yard rushing games. But you've got Sean Carson, he's also a junior, and you've got the redshirt freshman David Williams, who really impressed me during the South Carolina Garnet and Black spring game. The most important aspect of this football team on offense, though, I believe, is that offensive line. That's where it all starts for South Carolina. Maybe the best in the SEC with 4 starters coming back. They're really going to wear on that Texas A&M front that loses 3 starters. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, Stephen M. Texas A&M loses 3 starters from a defensive line that gave up 5.4 yards per rush last season. Zakoven Henderson, look out for this kid. He's 6'1", 315. He's a monster top recruit for Texas A&M, but he's just a baby. He's just a freshman. Can he hold up against an experienced offensive line that really knows what it's doing? All eyes, of course, are going to be on the combination of Kenny Hill at starting quarterback, won the battle for the starting quarterback position there. He's a sophomore, and I really want to see Speedy Noyle get a full season and see him do his thing at wide receiver for Texas A&M. So just a few of my thoughts going into this game. I think it all comes down to, do we see a more nasty, tenacious, more technique and fundamentally sound Texas A&M defense to be able to go up against not just Mike Davis or whatever running backs South Carolina brings, but to be able to match up against that offensive line and the passing attack that Dylan Thompson brings as well.
Well, A&M, I would love to see my name because of his experience, because of his vision in the hole, his cutback ability, his elusiveness, his overall patience to run behind his pads. But if he can't go, you risk a lot of guys that are very, very experienced backups, with the exception of the freshman that you mentioned. But South Carolina's offensive line, one of the best in the SEC. They know how to set the edge in the run game. They block well for Dylan Thompson in the pass game. But I'm looking to see Shaq Rowland at that wide receiver position. No more A. Sanders. How does Shaq Rowland play? Him now having to step up as that lead receiver. So that'll be interesting. You look at Texas A&M. You mentioned Kenny Hill. I'm looking to see the running back play of Trey Carson and Trey Williams. It's the battle of two Treys. We have the Trey conundrum. How will they be able to take so and their ability to run the football? You look at the wide receiver position. It's not just Speedy Noyle, but Texas A&M brings back Malcolm Kennedy. They have Ricky Seals-Jones. They have some experience coming back at receiver, but it's all about being able to create separation at that line of scrimmage and get downfield. I love this matchup, and as much as I want to say Texas A&M can win this game, Mark, as you and I both know, South Carolina, very difficult to beat at William and Bryce Stadium in South Carolina. Cox winning this football game 24-20. Close game, nail biter, but I give it to South Carolina 24-20 at home.
All right. Love to hear the predictions. So you knock out the predictions. I will save mine for a little bit later in the week. If for anybody out there that's followed my channel in the past, I will release my prediction video a little bit later in the week. So I'm going to sit on this one as well. Texas A&M and South Carolina. Gamecocks a pretty substantial favorite at home. We mentioned Speedy Noyle. You came back with Ricky Seals. He's a kid that just started the first game of last season, got hurt early in the season, and Texas A&M fans can't wait to see him on the field for a full season, hopefully. Middle linebacker Jordan Mastrogiovanni for Texas A&M as a kid, is just a sophomore that had to fill in as a starting middle linebacker after the suspension during the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl last year, and he was a bit overwhelmed at that point, but they're really riding a lot on this kid to make the right calls, to do the right things at middle linebacker for Texas A&M, and his counterpart on the South Carolina sideline has got to be Sky Moore, one of the best, as a freshman. So he could have a real breakout season for South Carolina at linebacker, and it's really been a strength flip for South Carolina, where they've gone from having the dominating front four and being a bit thin at linebacker, and they've changed the defensive concept because they've got better linebackers this year and inexperience up front, and the secondary is a really mess. So at this point, if Texas A&M can somehow get some productive play and consistency out of Kenny Hill, he could have some success against some inexperienced defensive backs for South Carolina. All right, also, not to be hidden under the radar on Thursday night, we've got Ole Miss taking on Boise State. They go at it in Atlanta. One of these matchups where Boise State early in the season came to the realization 10 or 12 years ago, hey, if we're going to emerge on the college football map, we've got to schedule huge games, neutral sites, primetime national television, and that's what Boise State has done, and typically they've done it successfully. They've beaten Virginia Tech, they've beaten Georgia, they've beaten Oregon in the last 10 seasons. Now this Boise State team comes in, though, with a new head coaching situation, also a new coaching staff. So Brian Harsin comes in. Chris Peterson's gone after establishing that program and really building on it. He didn't establish it. Others did before him, including Houston Nutt, but he comes in and really raises it to the elite of college football. He's gone to Washington. So you got a new coaching staff at Boise State. I think the one thing, as I look through the matchup, Stephen M., that I see as a huge advantage beyond the athleticism of Ole Miss is they've got an offensive line that is just huge. Not huge by SEC standards, but huge by Mountain West standards and what Boise State is typically going to see. So Laramie Tunsil and company can lean on that Boise State defensive front and get some good things going offensively for an Ole Miss offense that has all the pieces in place, but disappointed at times and didn't show up against the likes of Alabama and Missouri last season. So we got Ole Miss and Boise State, kind of the late night game at 9 o'clock on Thursday night.
Clock, and as you mentioned, though it's gone over days of Chris Peterson, gone over days of players like Kellen Moore, Austin Pettis, Titus Young, Doug Martin, put talent on that football field to face Ole Miss, and they're still going to compete, and they're going to compete at a high level. But when you look at Ole Miss, too much experience, too much talent. It's not just with Bo Wallace and Itoris Mathers and Mark Dodson and the wide receivers led by Laquan Treadwell and tight end Evan Ingram. You look at that defensive side of the football with guys like Robert Kindici, Cedarius Bryant, C.J. Hampton, and the leader, Cody Pruitt, who had 6 interceptions last year, the lead of the SEC. Too much experience, too much talent on Ole Miss' side of the football. As we both mentioned, do they have that consistency? That's going to be the question. Can they come out consistent, play after play, dissect what Boise State is bringing to them from its defensive aspect, and really play a full 4 quarters? Head coach Hugh Freeze is trying to establish with this football team, play the full 4 quarters. Don't just give me a first half. Don't just give me exercise a full competitive football game. That's going to be the mantra. A full extent of competition for 4 quarters. I like Ole Miss in this football game, what Bo Wallace and company brings to the table. Boise State will compete points on the scoreboard, but overall, I have Ole Miss taking this one 30-14.
I like that score. I think Boise State will compete. They're technically sound, fundamentally sound. They will play hard. They're used to the spotlight. They understand it, but at the same time, they're not as talented as some Boise State Bronco teams of the past. Ole Miss has this game athletically. They've got it in regards to size, what we just matched up, and also Laquan Treadwell is salivating right now because he's got a 5'9" and a 5'10" corner on the other side, and he at 6'3" is going to match up against some smaller corners, and he's not a elite burner, but he's a guy that's going to win matchups against corners, especially of that size. Boise State had huge issues against the better teams that they played last year. Even though the Broncos have their 3 top interception leaders from that secondary back, they had huge issues in the pass game against Oregon State and against Washington, getting blown out in those 2 games, especially against Washington, going 0-2 against those 2 Power 5 teams. They gave up 72% completion percentage, 320 yards per game through the air. So Boise State needs to clean that up, and we don't know if they've addressed it well enough to handle Bo Wallace throwing to Laquan Treadwell and company. Evan Ingram, also a security blanket for Wallace at tight end. All right, a game that I'm really looking forward to on Saturday night. We'll also mention that on Thursday night, if for whatever reason Ole Miss and Boise State gets out of hand, you could flip to Vanderbilt and UMass, which I may do during the commercials, but we expect Derek Mason to get off to a good start in his coaching tenure at Vanderbilt, taking on the Minutemen, who finished 2-10 last season in the MAC. So we've got LSU and Wisconsin on Saturday night, Stephen M. And for those of you that like differing matchups and styles, you're not going to see it in this game. You're going to see 2 teams that mirror each other in terms of their offensive approach. You will see actually 2 running backs in the backfield, meaning a fullback much of the time, unlike what we see throughout most of college football, outside some of the Big Ten and outside some of the SEC. So these are the 2 conferences that still have a semblance of 70s and 80s style football with a fullback. Not all the time, but they will run a fullback, and so that's fun to see for a guy like me that wants to see the I formation from time to time. LSU and Wisconsin, 2 very similar teams in their approach. LSU, again, would have the speed advantage, the athletic ability on their side. Wisconsin, though, has favored very well. I'm not meaning winning every game, but being competitive every game that they've played the SEC in recent years. They've been very, very competitive, very strong. Look at the South Carolina Capital One Bowl game. That was a very, very fun, entertaining game to watch because Wisconsin rammed it down South Carolina's throat. So despite the prowess of Clowney and Sutton and Quarles up front, Wisconsin could still run it on that good of a defense. They had issues throwing the ball in key situations. So we got LSU and Wisconsin, and they hook up in Houston, Stephen M.
Mark, being in Reliant Stadium, I am very, not just the I formation, but the similar styles, Johnson, ground and pound teams, defensive-minded programs. But with LSU, the quarterback battle right here, I think Anthony Jennings will get the nod to start first, and offensive coordinator Cam Cameron and Les Miles will work in Brandon Harris. But this is going to be Anthony Jennings, game one. How much are you mentally prepared to face Wisconsin? How much have you prepared in the playbook? How much have you prepared with having that mental clock in your mind, getting that ball out with your 3, 5, and 7-step drops and finding those hot read receivers? Those are my questions for Anthony Jennings. For the offensive line of LSU, can they set the edge and allow guys like Kenny Hilliard, Terrence McGee, freshman running back Leonard Fournette to get to the outside, but not just get to the in-between tackles? Dupree, who is that LSU receiver that's going to step up and run savvy routes against Wisconsin secondary? They always keep and they have one again this season, being able to go Heisman front runner. This is going to be a tough, pretty match. And as much as I want to say LSU, Mark, give me the dairy. Give me the cheeseheads. I'm going Wisconsin. The basketball game, close, but I'm picking Wisconsin to 24. It's going to be a close win for the Badgers in Reliant Stadium. I'm going Wisconsin.
I've been looking at this game the entire offseason thinking, okay, if I could only see one game on opening weekend, and I expect to see about 6, but if I could only see one, it will be Wisconsin and LSU. I want to see the Big Ten and the SEC duke it out. We know that the SEC has emerged as by far the better conference. I don't want to say by far, substantially better. But these two, historically, are the two best conferences, the two power conferences, the two that kind of control college football in terms of revenue, in terms of eyeballs on the screen, in terms of butts in the seats. So I still love these matchups. And again, if you look through history, Wisconsin doesn't always win, but over the past 10 or 12 years, they've played extremely well against the SEC. Man, the more I break down this game and really grind it down, I think we start with a talent disadvantage for the Wisconsin Badgers. They recruit top 30 or 35 classes. LSU recruits top 5 and 10 classes. Wisconsin's been able to overcome that in the past, much like Michigan State. But in this game, it's going to be difficult for Wisconsin, I believe, to generate offense. They named Tanner McAvoy, not Joel Stabby. Joel Stabby's the veteran. He's the guy that's won a lot of football games for them, but he's been a bit of a disappointment. 13 picks last year. He's made some mistakes. He's limited because he doesn't give you the run option. Tanner McAvoy played safety last year. He gives you the run option. He's a dual threat guy. And Wisconsin, outside of those great running backs, Melvin Gordon, and a guy that a lot of people don't know about, Corey Clement, who had a great freshman season, Wisconsin is very limited outside. Jared Aberderis is on to the Green Bay Packers. And they have unproven wide receivers, so they believed that they needed to get a quarterback in there that could make plays in space. I don't know that Tanner McAvoy, he's gonna threaten the LSU defense to an extent, but they have too many athletes on that side of the football, I believe. I'm not going to reveal my pick here. I just think it's going to be somewhat difficult for Wisconsin to generate offense, typically in these games because of the athletic disparity and the disparity in talent. Wisconsin has to play an air-free football game. LSU could cough it up a couple times and still win this game because they can break off a 75-yard pick return or a play in special teams where they can get out in the open field and really utilize the speed. So LSU-Wisconsin, I think, is going to be fascinating, as it always is, among the upper echelon of the SEC taking on the Big Ten. All right, Stephen M., we've got another matchup here. Another huge one. We got Clemson and Georgia, and we know what happened last season. These two teams came in as close to top 5 ranked teams, and this game was played in Clemson. It was a great game. Todd Gurley went off for about 150 yards in that game. Taj Boyd and all the star power on the Clemson offense with Martavis Bryant, Sammy Watkins, and it was a shootout. And Clemson survived at home like 38-35. Georgia suffered some injuries in that game. Then they continued to suffer injuries, and we unfortunately never got to see the Georgia team that we really needed to see, with Gurley healthy in the backfield, Keith Marshall backing him up, and not great wide receivers, but really good wide receivers, and a deep core of wide receivers was completely depleted, and Aaron Murray, of course, went down late in the season as well. So we never saw Georgia at full strength. The Murray era is gone. Hudson Mason steps in. Fortunately for Georgia, he's got big game experience against a rival in Georgia Tech in a bowl game against a quality Nebraska team. So Hudson Mason steps up as a senior. He's been waiting for this opportunity. You've got the same situation on the flip side. Cole Stout patiently waiting behind Taj Boyd, and now he gets a shot as a senior in leading the Clemson offense and leading a Clemson team that surprisingly now maybe a little bit better on defense, led by Vic Beasley. So we got Clemson and Georgia, Stephen M. I love this one too.
I love this one. You mentioned the experience that Hudson Mason had last season, playing in the bowl game against Wisconsin and playing against Georgia Tech. But the third thing, Mason has the pieces back around him healthy. And that's the critical one. You have a healthy Todd Gurley, a healthy Keith Marshall, a healthy Malcolm Mitchell, a healthy Justin Scott Wesley. You have a healthy running back core too. So that's key for Georgia. You look at Clemson, yes, no more Taj Boyd, no more Andre Ellington, Martavius Bryant, or Sammy Watkins. Clemson does still have some formidable pieces there offensively. Defensively, you mentioned Vic Beasley, a very potent guy that can bring the pressure, that can hit, bring down receivers, bring down opposing running backs. So a very good matchup with Mark Rick, Georgia, and Dabo Swinney of Clemson. But in this game, because of the fact that you have so many healthy pieces returning to Georgia offensively, got to get the edge here to the Bulldogs, because Hudson Mason is going to have so much to work with. He's going to have a lot to work with. He's going to be able to get these players the ball in space and let them make the run after the catch and let them be able to do what they do once they hit the open field. So I'm going to go Georgia 35-21. Clemson's going to score. Dabo Swinney's a guy that's going to get the offense in rhythm. And let's not forget, Chad Morris is one of the best offensive coordinators in the game. He's one of the best quarterback coaches in the game. So no doubt about it. But I'm going to say Georgia 35-21 in favor of with that big game experience, having the pieces healthy around him.
The difference possibly for Georgia this season versus what they've had in the past is they recruit top 5, top 10 talent even on defense. They have had the explosive offenses under the guidance of Aaron Murray, but have had the pieces in place in regards to talent moving on to the NFL to have great defenses. They've had okay defenses. Something's been missing. Jordan Jenkins, Leonard Floyd, Ramik Wilson, one of the best in the business, Amarlo Herrera, a guy that's under the radar because of the guys I just mentioned. This is a team that has substantial defensive talent. Todd Grantham's moved on to Louisville. We talked about that transition in previous weeks, Stephen M. Jeremy Pruitt is a teacher. He's an instructor. We'll see if he can get the most out of this talent, and it starts with this game against, a Clemson team that doesn't have the star power on offense that it has, but has elite speed and can match up against the SEC, one of the few teams from the ACC that can match up against an SEC team, and it's going to be fun to watch. And I'm going to be interested to see if this is a 9-3, 8-4 Georgia team, or because they get the most out of the defensive talent and really sell the scheme, the kids buy in and play hard, committed football for 12 games, whether they could do something special in the SEC East. And we'll get your pick on the division championships and the SEC in just a few minutes. Clemson, Georgia should be interesting one right there. Before we dive into Alabama, West Virginia, Stephen M., I want to mention something that I think is extremely intelligent that the SEC has done, and they have been at the forefront of college football. And this is basically from an administrative standpoint, aside from the talent base that they have in the South and that they've taken advantage of that, administratively, in terms of foresight and vision, they've been way ahead of everybody else. The conference championship game, TV deals, other things that they've done in branding the SEC. And this is another great example. They have lined up a Thursday-Saturday matchup the past few years. Let's play a Thursday night game in prime time, get it on ABC or ESPN, and we'll throw out a Georgia, an Ole Miss, and we'll usually play an ACC team like we've seen the past few years. But this year it's Ole Miss and Boise State. Then they stay at the Georgia Dome, and then they play another game on Saturday and put it in prime time. Or in this case, I think it's a 3:30 game, but it's usually a better matchup than this. But still, another SEC versus another Power 5 conference school, and usually been a really good matchup with Virginia Tech, Clemson, some other schools in the mix. But this year it's Alabama, West Virginia, and another reason why the SEC has separated itself is they own this opening weekend because they get the best matchups across the board. So here's the one that I'm going to stay out of your way, Stephen M. You got Alabama and West Virginia.
Mark, this game has so many underlying scenarios, but the one key one is who's the better Florida State transfer. In life, Mark, people look for the BBD, the bigger, better deal. It doesn't matter if it's Coke and Pepsi. It doesn't matter if it's Nike and Adidas. It doesn't matter if it's Burger King or McDonald's. People love the bigger, better deal. In this case, it's Clinch Rickett versus Jacob Coker. Both guys transfer from Florida State. Clinch Rickett, 6'2", 180 pounds, more of a pro-style guy. Jacob Coker, 6'5", 230-plus pounds, dual-threat guy. Jacob Coker backed up E.J. Manuel in 2012 and Jameis Winston last season. In 9 games of mop-up duty, Coker passed for 295 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Now, as of right now, Blake Sims will get the nod to start against West Virginia because of his knowledge and experience. And let's be honest, he stayed in Jacob Coker's hip pocket this entire fall camp. So Blake Sims will start against West Virginia. The questions that will arise in this game, number one, Alabama's cornerbacks against West Virginia's receivers. West Virginia has 2 receivers that are 6'3" and taller. Alabama, with Eddie Jackson, he may not be going in the first game against West Virginia, so we'll see the cornerback scenario of Tony Brown, freshman corner, 6 feet. We'll have Bradley Seal and Cyrus Jones. So we'll have a rotation there with Alabama at the cornerback position. The question, does Kirby Smart have the cornerbacks take away the inside from the West Virginia receivers and force them outside and have the corners use the sideline as an extra defender and play the ball? Or do you allow them to go into the inside and just have the safety over the top to make crushing hits? Those will be questions asked there. Another issue will be in the quarterback situation. Does Lane Kiffin run the football more with T.J. Yeldon, Kenyon Drake, Derrick Henry, and just have the quarterbacks work on the short routes and build into the deep post patterns, the deep fade routes? Or does Lane Kiffin tell the receivers like Amari Cooper, Christian Jones, DeAndre White, tight end O.J. Howard, take the top off, burn them deep, get downfield, and will exercise the entire pass game. The final issue, Mark, Alabama's offensive and defensive line. Offensive line, there's going to be a lot of shifting play, a lot of Leon Brown play, a lot of Dominic Jackson play, a lot of tackle. He's going to start. Which already Clinch, Shepard. Can they? But guys and the guys that are experienced but haven't played much, some knowledge on the blocking schemes. Can these guys set the edge in the run game and block well for Blake Sims in the first half and Jacob Coker most likely in the second half? Can they block for these two quarterbacks in the pass game? The defensive line, an adequate pass rush. Alabama only had 22 sacks all season last year. That has to improve. And it starts with Ashawn Robinson, Jonathan Allen, Brandon Ivory, Jaron Reed, and the host of others that will rotate on that line. Can they attack West Virginia's offensive line up front, generate pressure? This is going to be an exciting game. But one of the first underlining scenarios, Mark, as I mentioned, the BBD. Who got the bigger, better deal between West Virginia landing Clinch Rickett and Alabama landing Jacob Coker? This is going to be an exciting matchup. I feel like West Virginia will score on Alabama's second team because let's be honest, Dana Holgorsen comes from that Mike Leach lineage. He's no huddle offense lineage. An offense that gives at time to time. We saw it with Auburn. In the end, for Alabama, too much as the game goes along. Final score, Alabama 45, West Virginia 13.
I like that score. I like that score a lot. I think that Alabama's way too much for West Virginia. You mentioned protecting the quarterback. That's always a theme. We could break down every matchup in the world, and it would come down to turnovers and pass rush and protecting the quarterback. It would come down to special teams plays. There would be those typical coach speak, and it's the truth, 3 or 4 categories that you would need to check off to determine who's going to win the game. But if we go back 1 year to the Virginia Tech game, Alabama had all sorts of issues that cropped up later in the season versus Auburn and specifically against Oklahoma, protecting A.J. McCarron. But Alabama was so much better than Virginia Tech in other areas that despite the 6 or 7 sacks on A.J. McCarron and not generating more than like 140 yards of passing offense, and T.J. Yeldon didn't have a big day, they got the pick 6 out of Sunseri. They got the return from, I believe, Christian Jones in that game. And the defense just clamped down on Virginia Tech. And they won by 35-10, even though it was an ugly football game from Alabama's perspective. Similarly, in this one, the only hope in the world
was the Christian Jones show.
Exactly. Christian Jones made some huge plays in that game. So my point is that Alabama can have a breakdown in an area and still be fine. They beat an 8-4 Virginia Tech team, one of the top like 30 or 35 teams in the country, and couldn't even block their defensive ends, but still it had little passing attack and still beat them by 25 points. It's similar in this game that the starting quarterback could struggle for Bama, but they will wear down with that 3-headed monster led by Yeldon. And wouldn't you expect maybe Yeldon gets 20, 22 carries, maybe close to that, and then Henry and Drake get another 10 or 12 between them, something like that, and they wear down the West Virginia defense. They beat them up. They're more athletic, and more importantly than that, they're more physical running the football, and I think they control the clock, control the game. And I get back to my original point, going off your point, is protecting the quarterback being so much more crucial for West Virginia. Clinch Rickett has to have a good game. Sims and Coker can have marginal games. Rickett has to light it up for them to have a chance. had Joe Lacey from GoForThe2.com on, and he thinks West Virginia's going to put a scare in Alabama. I just don't see it. Again, West Virginia will make a couple plays in the passing game, but to consistently move the ball down the field against Bama's defense, I just don't see it in this game. All right, let's move on to another SEC matchup, and the only reason, and I tried to go based on cachet and importance and down the line and intrigue in these games, but of course I started off with the Thursday night matchups, but we get back into SEC play, so this carries a little bit more weight when you're playing against your own division rival. So it's Arkansas, it's Auburn. The only reason it may not carry quite as much weight is because we expect Auburn to roll in this game, but the Tigers have had off-field, off-season issues concerning Nick Marshall and Jonathan Mincy. Arkansas is a football team that I really need to see improve. I don't know that it's going to show up in the record because the schedule is so brutal for the Hogs with Texas Tech and Northern Illinois out of the conference, and then the gamut that they've got to run in the division, plus the out-of-division games are extremely difficult for Arkansas, again, as they pick up some more difficult non-division foes and rivals that have been designated there in the SEC. So we got Arkansas, we got Auburn, and what do you expect to see out of this one, Stephen M., and do the Hogs have any kind of chance on the Plains?
Well, Mark, I feel like Arkansas will be much improved under Brett Bielema. I feel like the run game is going to be there with Alex Collins, Jonathan Williams back in the fold. This will be a confidence game for Brandon Allen if he's given the nod. Can he move the ball? Can he drive Arkansas downfield? Can he hit receivers in stride? Can he make accurate passes? Go through his progressions wisely. It's going to be a confidence game for him. On the flip side, when we look at Auburn, though Nick Marshall will not start, Jeremy Johnson is just as good of a passer as Nick Marshall. I feel like Nick Marshall's more of the zone read, deception, quick feet in the open field type of a runner, but Jeremy Johnson is that pocket passer that's mobile, but is that the ball in the right spot. It's all Greg Robinson's gone. Controlling the tempo of the game schemes, both run and pass, going to be Trey Mason no longer there. But you had Corey Grant, 600 yards last season, and combined for 12 touchdowns. You have freshman Rock Thomas, who's going to get some playing time in there. You know, at the receiver core, you have Quan Bray, you have Duke Williams, the JUCO transfer at 6'3". You bring back Sammy Coates, who's your leading receiver. Also, C.J. Uzomah at tight end. A lot of talent for Auburn on that offensive side of the football. Defensively, yes, Nosa Igwe is gone. D. Ford is gone. But you bring back two very important interior defensive linemen in Gabe Wright and Montavious Adams. Both guys experienced. Both guys can rush the passer. Both guys can stop the run. On the defensive back standpoint, Jonathan Mincy will not start, but you have Jermaine Whitehead, Robinson Threese, who is the leader of that secondary and is huge and being able to create turnovers. Robinson Threese is. So you bring back Threese and Jermaine Whitehead, two critical pieces. Auburn, too talented. They're not going to run away with it, but they're going to win this football game, even with the likes of Nick Marshall not starting. Arkansas will score. Alex Collins and Jonathan Williams will both be productive in this game. Powers will get some sacks. He will be a pass rush. Too much talent. Offense boost game. He'll be able to move the football from a quarterback standpoint in Arkansas. He'll get some drives going, but in the end, I see taking this game 35-14. Too much talent on Auburn's side of the football in this game, but not enough athleticism. This 35-14, and it's on the plane, so the bald eagle will be flying. Those War Eagle chants will be chanting. Ruckus, hostile environment. Auburn wins this football game.
Yeah, we've talked X factors for a number of weeks, Stephen M. Smith. So we've looked at LSU's wide receivers. Can they replace Landry and Beckham? We've looked at the Texas A&M quarterback situation, the Alabama quarterback situation, South Carolina replacing Corral, Sutton, and Clowney. X factors. This X factor, to me, is Brandon Allen's show. Last year, he was a 47% passer against the SEC. He was a guy who threw more picks than touchdowns within the SEC. So if you look at the overall stats, they're not good, but they're even worse if you look at against quality opponents. Now, my Arkansas guy tells me that he injured his shoulder against Southern Miss, and that was well documented and that was chronicled. But at the same time, that he's a different quarterback than what we saw last year, and so we will see it. We will see if the shoulder has mended. Plus, he has learned a ton through spring drills, through summer workouts, and now fall camp. And we'll see a more mature Brandon Allen, possibly. That's going to be what I want to see out of this game, is Brandon Allen a different quarterback than he was last year. If he's the same quarterback that he was last year, let alone this game, do they have no chance? They have no chance of winning more than one game in the SEC. If he can somehow bring about what his promise was, and if he doesn't fulfill the expectations placed on him, then he's probably not going to be the starter for long anyway. They've recruited pretty well in recent years there at Arkansas quarterback, and bringing his brother and also Rafe Peavy, a top quarterback out of Missouri and one of the top 15 rated quarterbacks in college football or in high school football coming into college. So they may have to pull the trigger on Brandon Allen if he's not able to up his game this season. And Brett Bielema, again, the honeymoon's over. Now he needs to win some games in the SEC Western Division. All right, Stephen M., we've got one more really, really nice matchup, and this one will fly under the radar for obvious reasons because it's not Wisconsin, it's not Boise State, it's not Clemson, but it's Utah State. And for people that want to dismiss Utah State, they should probably take another look because this has been a very competitive football program over the past few years. So Gary Anderson, the head coach of Wisconsin, he came from Utah State. He had an 11-2 football team his last year there and won a bowl game. And yes, it's the Mountain West, and the Mountain West is pretty good if you really look at the teams in the Mountain West. No, it's not the SEC. It's not even the Big 10 or the Big 12. But they play quality football in the Mountain West, and they have a lot of talent. They send a lot of talent to the NFL. But even outside of the Mountain West, Utah State has been competitive against the likes of USC last season, barely losing a game at the Coliseum. So Utah State brings back a very, very good defense. They do lose some pieces there, but this is a program that's been very competitive. So this one flies under the radar. But Tennessee needs to look out at home because it could be difficult against the Aggies, not the Texas A&M Aggies, but the Aggies of Utah State. And this is a Sunday night game for us, so I'm looking forward to watching this one with the Vols at home, and we'll see. Much like Arkansas, is Butch Jones building the program. We see all the peripheries. We see the recruiting rankings. We see better facilities. We see things happening at Tennessee. Will it translate on the field this season for the Vols? All right, Tennessee, Utah State.
Mark, what better way to end a Sunday after church, good food, chill time with family, than to watch a good football game? It's Tennessee and Utah State. You talk about the Aggies of Utah State, the Mountain West, they do play quality football. And the motto of the Mountain West is, we're going to make you earn everything. We're going to compete, we're going to fight, and we're going to grind. And we're going to make you earn everything against us. And this game against Butch Jones is game one of how much has Tennessee grown, how much have the Volunteers matured, and how much more focused are they this season than what they were last season. They had some good games last season. They had some high moments this season for Butch Jones, Justin Worley. Can he season? And it starts in this game. Just like Brandon Allen, Mark, this is confidence game number 1 for Justin Worley. You have receivers like Jason Kroom and Marquez North, playmakers on the edge, versatile playmakers that can stretch the field, savvy route runners, can high point the football, and let's just say they have amazing hands to back it up. So you have Jason Kroom, you have Marquez North, you have some pieces there at receiver. On defense, we know A.J. Johnson at linebacker, but they also have Cam Sutton at their defensive back position. Can Tennessee put together a quality season, a bowl game season? And it starts with Utah State. They can't go in here sleeping. Not on Sunday, Mark. Yeah, I know you just had your fried chicken and your collard greens and your mac and cheese, but you can't go into Utah State slipping. You got to come in this game focused and prepared to play a 4-quarter football game. It starts with Butch Jones right now, this Sunday. Can you fight for 4 quarters? Can Justin Worley place the ball in the right spots, be an accurate passer, and survey the offense edge in the run game? Defensive line, a pass rush. Can they against Utah State? On paper, it seems like Tennessee game. Be alert. They have to play sound. They have to play fundamental. My final score in this football game, Mark, I'm giving the edge to the Vols. I'm giving the edge to Rocky Top, 28-10. Utah State will battle. Utah State will slug it out with them, but Tennessee is an SEC school. Even though it's a military SEC school, it's an SEC program. I'm giving it to the Vols, 28-10.
Yeah, specifically over the last couple of years, Butch Jones has brought in top 20 recruiting classes at Tennessee to get the talent level close to what it's been in the past under Philip Fulmer. It's still not there in regards to depth of talent. I think an alarming stat for Tennessee, not necessarily in this game, but as they progress through the SEC season, is that they return no starters along either the defensive front or the offensive front. So despite Tennessee's struggles the past few years, they did have one of the better offensive lines in the SEC, and they could really ram down the football down people's throats with Rajon, Neal, and company. And Tennessee's going to have to regroup and find some players there, and I know they've recruited them. Can they prove it on the field? Where Tennessee's extremely strong and where I expect them to compete at an SEC level, meaning with Georgia and South Carolina and Florida, would be in the secondary and at wide receiver. I think they're extremely strong and have tons of talent that I'm excited to watch. Again, in the secondary, we've already seen Cam Sutton emerge as one of the top defensive backs in the SEC. And again, Marquez North and company at wide receiver for the Tennessee Vols. Utah State, Tennessee, this should be a good one. But again, the Vols with more speed and athleticism and an SEC talented team in most areas should have the decided advantage. So, Stephen M., for all the teams that we've mentioned, whether it's Tennessee, whether it's Georgia, whether it's LSU, on down the line, Ole Miss, and certainly the matchup with Texas A&M having to take on South Carolina, all these teams have to come with their A game in week 1. Maybe not Alabama so much, but everybody else is playing a team that may not be quite as talented, except maybe Georgia-Clemson, the talent pretty much even on the field there. But otherwise, a team we've got to take very seriously. A couple other teams in the SEC can kind of ease into play and kind of get a barometer for where they stand that first week. So we got Mississippi State taking on Southern Miss, Kentucky against UT Martin, Mark Stoops trying to win more than 2 games this season, Missouri against South Dakota State, and Florida against Idaho. I'm going to be very intrigued to see what the Gators have once they play a really good team, and I believe they might have a toughie before Alabama, or it may be the Crimson Tide in week 4. But those are some of the other games that if you're a true diehard, that you watch the games we've already talked about, and you DVR these games, and watch them. But I will just have to take a pass on those games because there's so many good games involving SEC teams this week that, again, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Missouri, and Florida will get our focus in later weeks. All right, Stephen M., the moment of truth. So you've given us our predictions. You've gone out on a limb giving us some predictions. So if I've got this right, everybody in the SEC wins out of conference except LSU loses a tough one against Wisconsin, and you love South Carolina to win a very good game against Texas A&M at 24-20. Now, let's look at the season. Let's look into the crystal ball, Stephen M., and go forth to that first week of December to the SEC championship game in Atlanta. How do you see the East shaking out, and size up the SEC West for us?
How I see the East shaking out, Mark, for the Southeastern Conference, I have, I have Georgia winning the SEC East. I have Georgia winning the East. I feel like this is going to be the year of a special year for Hudson Mason, especially if all the pieces offensively can stay healthy and defensively, if the players can buy into how Jeremy Pruitt is going to really come in and really teach, coach, mentor, and provide. I like Georgia to win the SEC East. I have South Carolina coming in at number 2, simply because offensively, yes, you have Dylan Taylor, a good cohesive offense. They'll have those, even with J.C. Jr. line. South Carolina will have, I feel like, as they continue to build down the season, they'll get stronger. I have South Carolina finishing at 2, at 3 here. Let's see here. I'm gonna go with Florida. At 3, I have Florida. Florida will be much improved. I feel like the hiring of Kurt Roper from Duke. Kurt Roper has sat under David Cutcliffe, and if we know anything about David Cutcliffe, he's worked with the Manning royalty. And yes, I do mean Peyton and Eli Manning when I revert to the Manning royalty. So Kurt Roper knows something about quarterbacks. He's going to work well with Jeff Driscoll, getting him to be at the most elite of talent that Driscoll can be. The running back core with Kelvin Taylor, Matt Brown, Matt Jones is going to really help with taking pressure off of Jeff Driscoll. With the receiving core led by Quentin Dunbar, can they get more of the versatility, the full production? That receiving core will be the question for Florida. Defensively, Vernon Hargreaves, one of the big-time names returning for his sophomore season. Can he continue to develop at the defensive back position? We all know how dangerous Dante Fowler is as a pass rusher. So I see 4. I'm going to go with the Missouri Tigers at 4. You look at Turning, Hansbrough, and Marcus Murphy returning at the running back position. Yes, you lose your quality pieces in Marcus Luke in Washington, but Missouri defense that can really solidify them, and of course, a great specialist like Andrew Baggett kicking for you. So I like Missouri finishing right behind Florida at that 4th spot, and then we have Tennessee, and then Kentucky after Tennessee. Tennessee, I think they'll get to a bowl game, but still a year or 2 away from really providing a scare against a lot of teams in the SEC. And then Kentucky lining up the rear. I still feel like Mark Stoops is still building the house there, Mark. He's still putting them cement blocks down as far as recruiting is concerned. But I have Georgia winning the SEC East. When I look at the SEC West, it's so top-heavy. It's so top-heavy with the talent going on there. I have Alabama winning the SEC West, and it's because of me not drinking the Crimson Kool-Aid. It's because of me not attending Alabama as a student. but it's because of the eyes of Nick Saban and company. For the first time, I see Nick started. Like last year, I'm looking at Nick Saban as he kind of got bored. And I know to depict of Coach Saban, but he kind of got bored. You had a lot of players last year that I talked to early in camp this season where they told me they yelled Landon Collins, Amari Cooper. Last season, it was a failed draft stock. It was more of me instead of buying in, and it's us. It was more of my draft stock, my chances, my opportunities. It was more of an individual thing than a team aspect. And as we all know, the team's name appears on a national trophy. It's not an individual's name. Oh, no. It's the team's name that appears on a national trophy, and a national title, and an SEC conference championship. But we're talking to Nick Saban. We're talking to offensive coordinator Lane Kiffin. We're talking to defensive coordinator Kirby Smart. All three guys have unanimously said this team, chemistry-wise, it's stronger off the field. The guys love each other. The guys have bought in. The guys are having more fun with each other. And the guys understand the little things. It's the little things that take you from point A to point B. I feel like Alabama is ready. They've watched that Chris Davis kick six against Auburn all summer. It's been seared into their minds all summer. They've watched that Oklahoma game where the offensive line just got taken to shreds by Eric Stryker. Defensively, Alabama watched Trevor Knight tear them to pieces. So they're ready for this football game. They're ready for this season. So I have Alabama winning the SEC West. I have Auburn finishing at number 2, a 2 of Gus Malzahn. It's year 2 of the unorthodox offense. The question for Malzahn, people are looking at you now. They're out for you now. You've become the hot. Do you run the ball more, or when Nick Marshall gets back into the fold of starting, do you look at your quarterback in Nick Marshall and say, young man, we're trusting you to pass the ball more, to recognize your receivers more, to locate the personnel more, to break down coverage more? That'll be the question. Defensively, we mentioned earlier, no more D4, no more Nosa Igwe, Carl Lawson dealing with an ACL. You still have Gabe Wright, Montavious Adams. Where does the pass rush come from? Who's going to be that linebacker that steps up? In the defensive secondary, yes, Jonathan Menzie. Yes, Robinson Thorese. Yes, Jermaine Whitehead. But can all these guys remain consistent? You lose Ryan Smith, you lose Chris Davis. But the guys returning. Consistency is key, Mark. You can have all the play toys you want, but if you're not consistent, you're not going to win football games. In special teams, who replaces Cody Parkey, who was huge in kicking field goals? Who replaces Stephen Clark, who was a weapon in the punt game? Those are going to be questions to answer as well. But I have Auburn finishing at 2. And number 3, SEC West, I'm going to say it right now. Hail State, Mississippi State. It's the year for Hail Vegas. Dak Prescott has the talent to get Jamion Lewis. De'Runyon Wilson will have great seasons at wide receiver. Ashton Shumpert is going to be a huge piece at running back. Defensively, you look at not only Chris Jones on the line, but Benardrick McKinney. You look at Tavez Calhoun and Jamerson Love in that secondary. This is going to be a very potent Mississippi State team. I have them at 3. Number 4, the Bayou Bengals. You can never count LSU out of the conversation. The Ominous Moon, Mike the Tiger, Death Valley, Bourbon Street. I am scared every time Alabama has to play there because the crowd is raucous. They have new renovations going on there in Tiger Stadium. And with Cam Cameron as your quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, he's going to mold Anthony Jennings. He's going to mold Brandon Harris. You look at the running back situation there. Like Alabama, LSU keeps a fresh stable of backs. Defensively will be a question. Tre'Davious White, who are going to be the leaders on defense that are going to really emerge. At the wide receiver, Malachi Dupree emerge. So those Miles, John Chavis, Cam Cameron will have to answer. But I have LSU at 4. Number 5, Ole Miss, the Rebels, Oxford. Bo Wallace, I take.
All right, I think we've lost Stephen M. Smith. Hopefully he'll be back in just a second running through his predictions. He's got Georgia in the East, Alabama in the West, so he's run down just about everybody. I'll give you my thoughts. I think Alabama wins the SEC Western Division for 2 simple reasons. They've got the best talent, not by a ton, but they've got the best talent, and that's saying so much in the SEC with the most talent in college football. They also have the easiest schedule. Non-conference, nobody. That doesn't matter in the conference race, of course, but they play Tennessee on the other side. They also have a date with Florida, and the Gators will be better than 4-8, but Alabama has the game against Florida as well. Compare that to Auburn, and Auburn has to meet Georgia and South Carolina in the other division, so that's a huge advantage for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Auburn won fair and square every game. They earned it last season, but at the same time, and we'll see if Stephen M. is back with us here, but Auburn won every game fair and square last year, but they did have a magical ride. Stephen M., you with us?
I'm right here.
All right, so you're going to finish up with Ole Miss, A&M, and Arkansas, I would guess.
Yes, sir. I have Ole Miss finishing 5th. I have Texas A&M after A&M. They've recruited very well. Kenny Hill at quarterback. As I mentioned, the running back talent of Trey Williams and Trey Carson, Ricky Seals-Jones, and, of course, Malcolm Kennedy at receiver. But defensively, outside of DeShazer Everett, who is going to be that player that really gives Texas A&M's defense a shot of energy in the arm? I have Texas A&M finishing 5th. I'm in Arkansas lining up the rear. Year truly competing, but I have Alabama winning the West, I have Georgia winning the East, and I have those 2 teams in Atlanta for the SEC title game.
Okay, so I started to mention when we lost you there for a second that Alabama wins the SEC West. These are my picks for 2 simple reasons. They've got the best talent, and not by a ton because this is the most talented conference in college football, but Bama does have a talent advantage over Auburn. They also have a schedule advantage. So Auburn has to play South Carolina and Georgia in the other division. For Alabama, it's Tennessee and it's Florida, and we expect the Gators to be better than 4-8. That will be a competitive game, but Alabama should go 2-0 against the SEC East, while Auburn, it's up in the air. South Carolina, Georgia, they have to play those 2 very good teams from the SEC East. Auburn, of course, earned everything they got last year. Everything was fair and square. They didn't win on any controversial calls or anything like that, but they had a little magic fairy dust somewhere to pull out the game that they did against the Crimson Tide in the Iron Bowl, and most notably the double tip against Georgia. Those things don't happen all the time. Auburn rode a magical season. They're still a very strong team, one of the top 10 or 12 teams in the country, but Alabama wins. I'm not that concerned about the quarterback situation at Alabama because we've seen it at Florida State. We saw it 2 years ago with Texas A&M and Johnny Manziel. We saw it with Nick Marshall last season at Auburn, an unproven quarterback molding himself around the scheme and taking coaching and playing well in a system. We saw that with Marshall. Manziel's another case. He was just a talent that could make plays in the open field and take breakdowns and make something happen. Nick Marshall fit into the system and made it happen. I think whether it's Coker or Sims, they both will play well within that system and make things happen. Not at the level of A.J. McCarron, but they will function well in that system. And Alabama also has the advantage. Unlike Kenny Hill at Texas A&M and Kevin Sumlin's situation taking on South Carolina in Week 1, they've got a 3-game buffer before they've got Florida. And I'm not discounting West Virginia, but I guess I am to a certain extent. Alabama wins that game big. So it's Alabama, then it's Auburn. I love the play that you make with Mississippi State. I think that they've got an exceptional defense. You mentioned McKinney, Chris Jones, a guy that flies under the radar that should have a breakout season. They've got an experienced quarterback in Dak Prescott who's just finding his own and needs to stay on the field and stay healthy in one piece. And Jamion Lewis is an exceptional receiver who could score a ton of touchdowns and make big plays for Mississippi State. I like them in the next slot over LSU, and LSU could go 9-3, 8-4, and still finish like Ole Miss, 4th or 5th in the SEC Western Division. Ole Miss, again, we've talked about the talent influx and the depth, and everything is much better than it was just a couple years ago, and they have really ascended, but it's just a stacked division, and I like Texas A&M, then Arkansas. A&M, it's going to be interesting to really focus on the defense and see if they've made defensive strides. They've recruited players, but it's one thing to recruit the talents. It's another thing to have it step up and be tenacious, not blow coverages, not blow assignments, tackle guys in space and make the plays and be a sound defense. That may take a year to happen. So just based on talent, Texas A&M should not be so atrocious on defense, but to fully get the talent and seize that talent and see it play out on the field, I think is going to take another year for Texas A&M. But they've got the 4 cupcakes non-conference, so as long as they can go 4-4 in conference, they go to a pretty good bowl game at 8-4. So I think between A&M, LSU, and Ole Miss and Mississippi State, you got a lot of 8-4, 9-3 type squads there. And again, Mississippi State and A&M do not play anybody non-conference, so they get the 4 wins out of conference pretty easily there. Over in the East, I like Georgia. They lose a couple games, but they still go 10-2 and go to the SEC championship game. Of course, those Georgia-South Carolina matchups typically tip the East. That will happen again. I like your pick with Florida coming in 3rd after South Carolina. I think the Gators will be much improved, but they still are not at quite the level of South Carolina and Georgia at this point. And, of course, they've got the non-conference game finishing up against Florida State that I would love to see Florida be able to get back into the mix and be competitive with the Seminoles by the end of this season. They've got 12 games to grow to be up to snuff to take on the Florida State Seminoles. I look at the Tennessee schedule, and it's going to be very difficult for them to get to 6 wins. Unfortunately, they don't have an Arkansas or somebody like that to play on the other side. They've got the designated game against Bama. I believe Tennessee's other game is against Ole Miss on the road, so they could go 0-2 outside the division and then have to face Georgia and South Carolina and Florida. And then they've got the game against Oklahoma. That's most likely a loss. They can't trip up against Utah State. They have to win that game. So even if they go 3-1 non-conference, they're going to have to go 3-5 and find 3 wins. And so they're going to have to run the table against the teams that they match up against, meaning Vandy and Missouri and Kentucky, of course, for Tennessee to get to a bowl game this season. But I like Georgia. I like Bama in the SEC championship game, and I hate to stick with the chalk, but I think Bama gets it done in Atlanta against a Georgia football team this year.
I think they get it done, Mark. You talk about a talented but a hungry Alabama team, and I heard what you mentioned earlier about the West Virginia is going to have to bring its A game against West Virginia. You have to bring your A game against every team you play because every team, their goal is to beat you. Every opposing team, their goal is to beat you, outduel you, outplay you. And if you come in with your B- game, your C+ game, it's not going to work. And even for Alabama, they have to come in there with their A-plus game, being able to execute drives, get momentum, and just be fluent. That's one thing Saban loves. Saban loves consistency. He loves his teams to be fluent, and he loves his teams to move forward. And that's exactly what Alabama's going to have to do against West Virginia, is drive the ball downfield. Now, am I saying get a touchdown every drive? That would be nice, but at least consistently move the football.
All right, there you have it, everyone, from Stephen M. Smith of TouchdownAlabama.net. He's got his predictions right there, Alabama and Georgia. I hate to stay in line with it and not cause any kind of debate, but I like the Crimson Tide and the Bulldogs to emerge in Atlanta on the first week of December as well. I'm Mark Rogers of MarkRogersTV, and this is the SEC in 60, and now we dive into the season and really enjoy it each and every week. Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern and noon Central, the SEC in 60, and then we have the podcast available for you on Tuesday morning, and this video uplink on YouTube, my channel at MarkRogersTV, and also my website, markrogerstv.com. All right, Stephen M., we will have games to talk about next week. It should be fun.
It should be exciting as always. Football is here. I'm excited. I have to go stock up on pizza rolls. I got to get food in this apartment.
All right, you got to stock up on the food. There's no question about that. For me, it's more about the sweets, but I won't go there right now. Everybody, we enjoy presenting this to you, and we appreciate your time, and God bless you until next week. And when we can talk about actual football on the field, we will see you next time.